Hello, welcome to another Techdive tutorial. We're going to be talking in Movie Studios 14 Platinum today, but not necessarily about Movie Studios 14 Platinum. We're talking about the two rules of Codecs. Rule number 1, don't compress, redress, and rule number 2, if compressing, then only do it once. So the whole goal in video, the whole goal in creating media and photos and everything is to get a beautiful image out there. And you need to think about compression and video codecs like water quality. The more you touch it, the more you contaminate it. The more you move it, the more you recompress it, the more you render it out, the more you change the file type, the more you're corrupting the pool it's in, and the more corruption of the video there's going to be. So you want to think about video quality like water quality. The more surfaces it touches, the more it's getting polluted. So as you're making these decisions, keep these two rules in mind. Rule number 1, don't compress, redress. So your camera has a file type. And again, I'm not explaining everything about codecs because that's a big topic, and this video is not going to explain the different types of compression. I'm not going to explain how pixels are repopulated, how file types work, and I'm not explaining all that because I want to do it. I want to do that video, but I want to do it right, and I want to do it perfectly. And to do that video, it's going to take some real time. It's going to take some I'm gonna have to draw examples and show you examples. Like, I want to do that video right, but I kept getting this question about how to how to use codecs. And so there's really two rules that if you follow these rules, you're gonna get good quality stuff. So rule number 1, don't compress, redress. So your camera has a codec that it saves its stuff in already. It has a file type that it already uses. If you create something with a single source, so if you're not grabbing things from YouTube and grabbing things and grabbing pictures and grabbing all these different media types and putting them together, then you can render out in what your camera did. And so I have my two favorites. My favorite number 1 is this codec right here. My camera spouts out in this codec. Why? Because it's a Sony codec and I have a Sony camera. It does do AVC HD. I haven't enabled that. I've enabled the Sony codec because I like it. This is what it spits out as, so this is what I want to render as. If it's spitting out and I'm rendering as the same file type, I'm not moving it, I'm not corrupting it, I'm just saving it again with the changes I made. So there's going to be very little loss. It's a lossless compression, and it's going to spit out in a nice video. It's going to be big. The render might be very fast, but it's going to be a very big file. It's not going to be internet friendly, but man, if I'm showing it to people, it's going to be beautiful. If I'm archiving the footage, it's not going to have any loss. It's going to be great. So that is rule number 1, don't compress, redress. Just find out what your camera spits out and try and render close to that setting. If it's AVC HD, render out as AVC HD. So the next rule is if you have to compress, make sure it only happens once. And so this rule really applies to internet or DVDs. So if you're making a DVD and you're using a DVD creation software, that creation software might recompress your footage again. So if you want to render out, for example, I use DVD Architect, you want to use a DVD Architect style. So right now I don't have it favorited because I've not really made DVDs recently, but you can use a DVD Architect file to render out, and the type of file it's going to be when it's on the DVD instead of having it compressed a second time. Another example of this, the biggest example of this, is the internet. YouTube will compress your footage as an MPEG-4. So one of the best things you can do is select Internet HD 1080p in Vegas, which is an MPEG-4, an MP4, and it is very similar to what YouTube uses. So YouTube won't have to do that much compression. I'm not going to say YouTube won't compress it further because it's YouTube. It's going to do whatever it wants to your footage when it uploads it. But if you're going to have to compress your footage, try and put it in a file type that's very similar to what it's going to be in its final destination. So if YouTube's got a special MPEG-4, then this internet-ready MPEG-4 is going to be similar enough to it where it's not going to have to make a lot of changes to your video. And so if you compress it as something else, then you're compressing it, and it's going to have to be compressed again. So again, rule number 2 is making sure that it doesn't have to be compressed multiple times. Always go back to the source. Anytime you have to change something, don't take a file you've already rendered and compress it into a different type. Go back to your source, go back to your project, and render it again, if at all possible. So like I said, there's not always a case for these things. There's not always the answer to everything. This is not a complete explanation of what codecs are, but these are the 2 rules that if you follow this, your video quality is going to be fair all the time. You're not going to have problems if you're trying to follow these 2 rules. So one last thing to say, another final file type you might end up with if you're not going for the internet, if you're going for a small video file, WMV, Windows Media Video, movie video. I'm not exactly sure what WMV stands for, but it's a Windows codec, and if you go as a WMV, that's usually the smallest codec. So that's it's a big compression. There's a lot of loss, but if you do it once, you go to your original project, you make a WMV, that's going to create something that leaves you with a small video that's good quality, but you don't want to touch it again after that. Don't upload the WMV to YouTube because it's going to compress it again, and you're breaking rule number 2. Don't turn your WMV back to your original camera quality because you're going to break rule number 2 and touch it too many times. You need to always go back to the sources, follow rule number 1, which is render out what your camera compressed it as, or rule number 2, render out to what your final media is going to need. If it's going to need to be small, if it's going to need to be on the internet, if it's going to need to be on a DVD, render out with that in mind so you don't have to render or compress again. Thanks for watching this explanation of my 2 rules of codecs. I would really like it if you checked out my Vegas tutorials. I got Movie Studio 14 Platinum tutorials. I got some review surprises coming down the pipe when it comes to some more software reviews and tutorials. I also got Steven and I have on this channel, we do lots of computer enthusiast videos as well, and we got a gaming channel, so please check out that content. Like if this video helped you out, and subscribe if you're looking for more. Thanks for watching. See you next time.